Hey guys, it's Connor.
And I'm Ryan.
I just want to let you guys know about an awesome podcasting tool called Anchor. We've recently switched to it for Theology Thursday, and it distributes all your podcast for you. It's a great hosting service. It's absolutely free, and it even lets you start sponsorship, making money with ads with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need for a great podcast in one place.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to Theology Thursday, an ecumenical space for students to discuss matters of faith and theology.
I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Locke.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
So here we go. It's going to sound a little different this week because they are coming in over the phone. Ryan's in another state, and Johnny is terrified of COVID-19.
I'm not terrified. I respect social distancing.
You wouldn't let me come to your house.
He's just afraid to talk to people.
Look, it's a gathering. It's a gathering of less than 10 people. You and I are less than 10 people, Johnny.
Yeah, but when you think about it, all the people that we've been in contact with in the past 24 to 48 hours equals more than 10. So it's like hanging out with like 30 people.
I mean, I actually haven't been in contact with more than 10 people in the last 48 hours.
No, but like combined. Like, if the three of us were to get together, like, you're...
Okay, but Ryan obviously can't because he's in another state. I'm talking about you and me. I'm saying I should be in your office right now, and I can't because you're buying into the media fear. It's a fake virus. It's not even real.
That's what I heard.
All right,
I heard a lot of other things, too.
I take that back. I want to be respectful. I know there's a lot of medical and healthcare people that are getting really frustrated by the people who are not taking this seriously. Now, by the way, some toilet paper memes are great. You know, you gotta, you gotta. So I'm not completely opposed to memes, but I also want to be respectful of the fact, shout out to all the healthcare professionals during this time. You're the real heroes. You're the real MVPs.
Totes.
Last week we were talking about how the coronavirus had its first 2 cases in Pinellas County, and man, what a shift in just a couple of weeks. In just 1 week.
Yeah.
In just 1 week.
10.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So why don't we give a little update on what's been going on? I mean, I'm sure most people know, but like, I guess from the perspective of us Pinellas County folks.
Well, I think that it's pretty much the same for everybody because now these recommendations are really strong recommendations. They're called that, I guess, because we're Americans and we like our freedom. But they're really asking us to do them. But it's just everybody has to practice social distancing. Pinellas County is getting a little bit more concerned, as is all of Florida, because now we're up to a couple hundred cases in Florida. So. It's becoming more real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're shutting a lot of things down as far as restaurants, different businesses and services are just having to close, theater chains, stuff like that. And the schools closed till the 15th, possibly longer. It's really wild. I have never seen anything like this.
Yes, history has. And I think that's what spooks so many people out is, and why we have to be so careful, and why everyone should go back and listen to our series on Revelation, is like, this is part of and we alluded to this last week, this is part of the ups and downs of history. It is unprecedented in some ways, and in other ways it's like, we're not promised we won't experience a pandemic in our lifetime. So,
right, yeah.
It's just hard for people to adjust.
No, I had a conversation with somebody about that the other day, and they said, well, this must mean Jesus is coming back because things are getting so much worse. And I was like, well, I'm sure there's some people who thought that during the Black Plague and the Spanish flu. I mean, this isn't the first time a pandemic has happened. And I feel like this is a perfect example of the same thing with terrorism and war and all these other things. People get in this mindset, and racism. I mean, all these different things that people point to as signs of the times. These things haven't necessarily gotten worse. It's just with media and technology, we have more exposure to it.
We do, and yet I think the flip side is, and one of the things that kind of supports our eschatology, which is that things are up and down in terms of circumstance, but the general trajectory is diagonally going upward, right? So we may have a dip, but we're generally headed towards goodness, towards the restoration of all things. And, with technology, we're better equipped to handle this than any other time, And I'm sure everybody could say that for the time that they were in, but, like, we have a leg up that, people who experienced the Spanish flu didn't have, and so forth. There's a lot more order and a lot more beauty in the fields of medicine, and an ability for the president to address the entire country at once. And, there's a lot to be hopeful about here.
It's a double-edged sword, though, because we also have greater means of spreading it as well with air traffic, travel, and fake news and stuff like that. So, but we do live in good times, I must say, to deal with this.
Yeah, there has been so much false information spreading about this virus, and it's just, I'm trying to stick mainly to the CDC. I will recommend on YouTube a guy named Dr. Mike, and I know you're like on YouTube, but he's an actual doctor, and he's just talking about, he's there experiencing this day to day, and I don't know, it's just like one of the few people I've found so far that's just like kind of common sense, and I like his slogan he's been using during all this, which is, I already forgot it. Aware, not anxious. Is that what it is? Alert, not anxious. That's what he's saying. We need to be alert, not anxious.
Alert, not anxious. That's a good, it's a good mentality.
So, I recommend his stuff. You can go check it out. I guess as a sub point, before we jump into our main topic, because we're already kind of headed there, it's interesting to see how this is affecting the movie industry. Universal decided to push a lot of their current theatrical releases as well as their upcoming releases in April straight to video on demand. So this Friday, The Invisible Man, The Hunt, Emma, a couple other Universal movies are just going straight to video on demand. And you can watch it from your home, even though these are either in theaters or we're coming to theaters this Friday. And Trolls 2 comes out April 10th. Well, now it's not being released in theaters at all. It's going straight to video on demand on April 10th. And a lot of other movies, Quiet Place Part 2, Mulan, Black Widow, James Bond, Fast and Furious. I mean, all these things have just been pushed out indefinitely. They haven't said whether they're going to do video on demand or whether they're going to change the release date. A lot of these are just postponed until further notice. And it kind of feels like most of life is postponed until further notice right now. So I think, for me, it's something we've been hearing about since January, the coronavirus, and it's something that we've all kind of been aware of and maybe made some jokes and memes about, but it was like Monday morning just waking up and, okay, this is actually affecting my life now. It's been really wild, because I do think while fear is not the proper response, we are having to figure out a bit of a different way of life for the next few months.
Yep. Yeah, I know that for like my classes, all online classes now, all public schools are done until further notice for the next few weeks. And I like a whole bunch of businesses are like, all right, we're closed down for the next few weeks. I think that's going to keep getting pushed back. And so the next few weeks to see how all this is going to unravel is going to be very interesting for sure.
Yeah, been a bit of a stock market crash. Been a lot of, it's definitely going to affect the economy in a big way. And it's interesting because, for me, day to day, I do campus ministry. My calling is to have a campus ministry in every school in our county, and schools are closed. So, and I know there's a lot of teachers, a lot of other people where it's just like, okay, well, what does this look like now? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So one of the things I wanted to address for those in ministry is we're going to kind of talk digital, online ministry approaches. there's some other resources as far as how to do that. You can go to Churchfront, Worship Artistry. There's a couple other people out there who are doing great things as far as telling churches, okay, this is how you can do a live stream. This is how you can do it for free. If you want to invest a little bit in it, this is another option. I mean, they're just walking you through it. Those are on YouTube and different things you can find. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what Theology Thursday is. This is not a tech podcast. What it is a theology podcast. And many churches are also closed for the foreseeable future until further notice. And they're switching to online services. They're switching to online small groups. And that is because the president issued basically, gatherings of 10 or more. Like, none of those. And even in those 10 or more gatherings, or 10 or less gatherings, like, be 6 feet apart. Like, really strict guidelines and regulations. And it's starting to look like they're going to get stricter in the sense that these won't be just recommendations. It's very possible that they really start enforcing these. And again, this isn't like the end of the world. This is just, we're trying to do what we practically can do to stop the virus from spreading while we don't have a vaccine. So none of this to strike fear, but just to say this is the reality and how do we approach it. But what I have gotten to watch from a distance, and even as somebody on a church staff, is that there's been a lot of criticism both ways. If you're closing your services, you're going to be criticized. If you're keeping your service open, you're going to be criticized. And so I know a lot of people are kind of looking for guidance. What's the right thing to do? And I thought what we could talk about this week was, from a theological perspective, based on Scripture, is it right for us to close our services and our gatherings during a pandemic? And so there's a few scriptures that come to mind, but maybe some kind of introductory thoughts as far as what you guys have seen on this so far, how you're feeling about it.
Well, I'll say, I know there's kind of on the news in our area, this is how I found out about this, but a pastor in Tampa, he's the pastor of the River Church, which is a Pentecostal church. He is refusing to close his church doors, and he says, quote, "We are not stopping anything. I've got news for you. This church will never close. The only time the church will close is when the rapture is taking place." Then he goes on to say, this Bible school, which is attached to the church, is open because we're raising up revivalists, not pansies. So this is a man who firmly believes that the church doors should not be closed during these fun times.
Well, that's it's really fascinating to watch kind of the charismatic response. You have these people like Hillsong and like Bethel that's known for doing some weird like supernatural charismatic stuff, especially Bethel. And they've been releasing these statements for their healing ministers to not visit the hospitals. And it's just been funny to watch.
Yeah, very interesting.
Because when people are... No, go ahead.
He also goes on to okay, so this dude's kind of into conspiracy theories, I guess, because he says, because the climate change narrative for global governance failed, they are using the World Health Organization to then come in and take over the control of nations, and then they're going to bring in vaccines. There's going to be forced vaccines, which they can kill off many people with vaccines. It's about population reduction because there are too many people on the planet. But with the correct vaccines, we can shoot them and then they can die.
Oh, man.
Okay, so this man's kind of full of baloney here. But,
a little bit La La Land right
now.
Yeah.
So he's kind of ridding of any credibility he may have had with that whole bit right there. Basically, the coronavirus was invented by Thanos.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense now. Look, theologically, we can't go back and say that there are scriptures, right, that can certainly guide us in this. And then there's a little bit of speculation we can do, and that can't be our absolute guiding light, the speculation. But, would Paul have told his people, especially since he had the letters, would he have written letters to people? I don't know. It's hard to say because, they didn't have the ability to communicate with a bunch of people at once the way that we do now via technology. But maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe God has especially equipped us for this time. In other pandemics and other illnesses, there were other ways besides social distancing to mitigate that risk. And right now, social distancing is the way until these vaccines and antiviral treatments come into play. So perhaps God has uniquely positioned us, you could spin it that way, for such a time as this, to continue to meet some spiritual needs while also protecting our neighbor.
Yeah, so, okay, a few scriptures that come to mind in this scenario that a lot of people are turning to. Peter talks about it, but also in Romans, the Bible does talk about respecting the governing authorities. So, when this became something where the president was saying, where the government was providing guidelines and restrictions to help, lessen the spread of this disease, that was a shift. That was like, this isn't just, some disease we're hearing about anymore. Like, now the local authorities are telling us something. The Bible does have something to say about respecting the governing authorities. And I'm still trying to find the verse, but why don't one of you say something while I'm finding it?
Well, there's this also like something simple that Jesus said, which is like love your neighbor as yourself. That's a huge deal. If you don't want to be surrounded by potentially infected people, why would we create environments that could potentially get other people sick? And maybe this is a stretch for some people, but I really look to Revelation for this. When they talk about the new heaven and the new earth, I just believe that we're supposed to start bringing that now, that Christ will come to finish the job, but that he's called his people to start building the holy city. And when you look at what it says in Revelation 21:4, it says that he'll wipe away every tear from your eyes. There'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. If you look at this scripture in light of the grander narrative of scripture, Jesus says in the Gospels that you won't say that the kingdom is here or there because it's at hand. It's happening now. And so this is past tense, like the old order of things has passed away or will pass away. But in Jesus' teaching in the Gospels, his whole point was, as we share the gospel, as the Spirit moves on the planet, the old order of things is passing away. And so that means that if we can mitigate mourning and crying and pain for people on this planet, we should do it. And we have the opportunity to do it with something as simple as just giving ourselves a little bit of space, Why wouldn't we do that as believers?
Yeah. And I mean, the verses I was thinking of are stuff that most people probably know. Romans 13 talks about respecting the governing authorities because God has put them into place, and that to reject their authority is to reject something that God has put into place, which incurs judgment. And basically, what we get from Scripture is that unless the governing authorities are telling us to do something that directly disobeys the law of God, to abide by it, to respect it.
Mm.
Now, here's where some people are going to argue on the other side that the Bible also says in Hebrews, do not neglect meeting together. And that's where some people are going to go the other way. Well, the government's telling us not to have church, and the Bible tells us to keep the Sabbath and not to neglect meeting together. And so that is them telling us to directly disobey God. Okay, so how do we navigate that?
It would depend on what time we lived in, but they're not telling us to not meet together. This is like a temporary thing for one thing, and there are still ways of meeting together via technology. Is that the same? No, absolutely not. We should long for the day that we eat together again, that we spend time together, that we serve together in groups. But the reality is we can still worship as one body in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah, Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that, the government's not telling us to not meet together because the government wants to destroy Christianity.
Right.
They're not telling us not to meet together for purposes of persecution of the church. They're telling us not to meet together because of a national crisis. So I understand that. I don't see a problem with this.
Yeah.
With the government telling us to use common sense when it comes to a virus like this that is ravaging the lands.
Yeah.
So I think that comes down to intention. You know, why is the government telling us not to meet together? And it's not because of persecution or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's a key thing there. I think people need to recognize that there's a difference between persecution and crisis and reacting to crisis. And we have so much technology, man. It really is remarkable that we are still able to even have interactive experiences virtually, where we're still discussing the Bible and encouraging one another and praying for one another. I mean, none of those things have to stop.
No. It's weird to me because I think for a lot of people, it comes down to this argument, and I don't want to judge anybody who made a different decision than maybe the majority is making, but they often kind of boil it down to, well, if you just have more faith, then it would be fine, you know. And I honestly think it takes more faith to do what the churches are doing to protect the community around them than it would to do something like that pastor you referenced, Ryan, was saying. I mean, honestly, it's easier to open your doors and blame it on a conspiracy or, well, you know, it's just part of the end times and oh yeah, we lost Margaret, but you know, that's just part of it, you know. And at least the doors are open, and you know,
and the tithes are still coming in.
Tithes are still coming in, right? We're not having to upgrade our streaming plans to add other types of expenses that we may not be getting back in. And honestly, there's a little bit more certainty in deciding to stay open. That is, some people probably are going to get sick. We're going to contribute to this pandemic. But, you know, what can we do? We have to have faith, and we have to keep our doors open. I think that the constituency that would continue to go to church in that case would be okay with that, and it would kind of be a no harm, no foul thing, other than the fact that you were a detriment to society, which is, I don't know, that just doesn't seem like what Christ has called us to do.
Yeah, I don't have any...
Well, okay, here's what... I don't want to imply that everyone that's kept their doors open is only doing it because of money, but I do think that could be a motivating factor. And that people need to kind of check themselves. I know there's a lot of big churches that did live stream last Sunday, and were at about 50% of their normal offering, even though they really pushed the online giving. So it is going to affect things. I think especially in the beginning as people are getting used to it. But also some people are losing their income. They're trying to figure out what are they going to do for work, you know. So we got to be sensitive to that. And I mean, you know, if we're doing things remotely online from homes and from smaller office spaces, I mean, it's less utilities. I mean, there's certain things, it kind of evens out. It's going to be okay. Churches are going to make it. God's going to protect his church. But we got to be smart about it. And I think, Johnny, one of the things you were saying before we got on the phone is you have, you know, places like Disney World and all these big corporations that love making money shutting down for the well-being of thousands of people.
Right.
And so if the church is the last person, you know, the last people to do that, what does that make us look like?
Exactly. That's been my big thing is, like, there are corporations who have nothing to gain from this that are making sacrifices to protect the people around them. The church should be on the front lines of doing that kind of work. So yeah, there's no way you can tell me it's actually wrong to shut the doors of the church when we all agree that the church is not a building. Now, should we meet together? Yes. Should it be ideally in person? Yes. But the command is to meet together, and we can continue to do that. My fear right now, fear, maybe more concern for the church, is I just don't want them to get comfortable. I mean, it is easy to wake up, to turn on your Keurig, you know, to not, you know, to stay in your jammies, And there may be people, I just don't want people to get used to this because, to serve the community, to do food drives and to pick out angel trees and stuff like that, it's good to be together, to serve and do those things. And so I hope that this doesn't create a comfort level on Sunday mornings that is a little too welcome.
Yeah, and I totally hear what you're saying. I guess the optimist in me thinks that this is actually going to help the church long even more so for those in-person gatherings. And that it's going to be, not taken for granted, hopefully, after this, that when we finally are able to meet together again, it's like, man, this is amazing. I never want to forget, how important and how special this is.
Well, and I agree with you, but the pessimist in me says that it's going to be the remnant of true believers and people that are truly members of the church. And we may find that number smaller than we thought. So I do believe that there's going to be people at home with a sense of belonging in their hearts. I don't know if that number is as big as we think it is. I could be wrong. Maybe it's exactly how many people we think it is. But even if our churches come back smaller than they were before, which is another fear that people have, I think they're going to come back more genuine. And that's one of the many good things that could come out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's a lot. And I definitely, my hope is not to, my goal in this is not to criticize people who have or even still are making the decision to keep their doors open or assume that I know your intentions in doing that. I do think the church needs to come together during this time and support one another and pray for one another because every decision that every pastor and every ministry leader has been making this week and will continue to make in the coming weeks is extremely difficult. I mean, this has come out of nowhere, and figuring out how to navigate it is difficult. And so I don't want to downplay that. But I do think that this is the right thing to do, is to not make ourselves look like idiots and not put other people at risk. So I'm not calling anybody an idiot when I say that. I think there's a biblical case.
Except maybe the River Church pastor.
Maybe.
Can we call him an idiot?
Well, I don't think we should call anybody an idiot. There's a biblical case for that too. But just yeah, not here to criticize, put anybody down, but we really do need to think about this, and we need to be careful. And I think again, being alert, not anxious, and not. I don't think we need to buy into this like fear mentality. It's just about doing the right thing. And so I'm praying for all the churches and ministry leaders in the coming months as we figure out what this looks like. But also recognizing that while I do think this is going to have long-lasting effects on, culture as a whole, we don't have to act as if this is the new norm. This is a temporary norm. We're not going to be online forever. We are going to be online for a few months though, and it might be longer than some people are thinking. And we got to be okay with that.
Yeah, and different cultures are handling it differently. And I think keep in mind, probably the hardest that it's hitting in terms of the timing is going to be the United States, because we like to just check boxes and fix things, and this isn't going to be forever, but it is going to be longer than I think any church leader, any American wants it to be. And I think God's He's going to teach us a lot about patience. He's going to teach us a lot about what our idols are. Our idols of sports, of control, of being able to be in control of things, which is, we find out is just an illusion, of money. We're going to find out that even the best of us had put those maybe on a higher pedestal than they should have been. And that's going to be good. That's going to be good for us spiritually.
Yeah, I think so. Well, look, we're praying for everybody, and we are going to continue to do Theology Thursday. I don't want this to be the only thing we talk about, but I did think this week it would be good. And we were entering a new section in our systematic theology. In fact, it's the last section of this season. and that's the church. So this was kind of a perfect time to talk about this.
Yeah, maybe between now and when we talk about the church, we'll have a few more notes prepared. And like you said, we don't want to harp on this forever and ever, especially if this is going to go on for a while. We don't want to be talking about it every week. But I think if we do get into sort of the weeds on what the church is and who the church is and what the purpose is, we'll be able to point out that, you're still able to do church and also care for your neighbor in this unique situation.
Yeah, and that's kind of what next week's topic is going to be, is what is the church anyway, like according to the Bible.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about that because I love the church and I think it's super important. So, Ryan, any closing thoughts?
I am in agreement with all of you. That's all.
Listen, man, you better make it back across state lines, man.
Johnny.
Listen, I'm about to hop the border if I need to. I can jump the fence. I'll just dodge the cops,
Wait, we respect our governing authorities. Remember, we should be talking about it.
Oh, right, yes. Sure. You guys may have to come and rescue me.
So you want us to disrespect the governing authorities? Okay.
Right, I'll be here waiting for you.
Here's the thing: Trump is listening to this episode right now, so.
Yeah.
Is this phone call bugged?
Probably.
Ryan, I hate to break it to you, but
guys, I hear sirens outside. Guys, there's lights outside my window right now.
All right, Ryan. Well,
Guys,
we hope to have you. We hope to have you next week on Theology Thursday.
I'll make a phone call from prison.
Okay, sounds good. Theology Thursday in jail. That'll be great.